So while I was working on redoing my tier list video, a thought occurred while I was getting B-roll footage for Walter, while also thinking about Wicker, and I thought of something that I wanted to discuss with all of y'all. And this might be a pretty contentious topic just because the answer feels like it seems a bit obvious, but the more I thought of it, the more I realized that it might not be that clear. So I wanted to talk about character synergies and whether or not they matter in Don't Starve Together, which is somewhat complicated, because DST is a very complicated game, and all the characters in them are unique and complex in their own ways. And likewise, they pair up with each other in a variety of ways that a lot of people tend to think of as pure synergies that should dictate how you choose characters. And I want to go through some of the most popular synergies and whether or not they're particularly good. But first, I want to take a moment to talk about a game in which synergy is almost definitely a factor, and that's this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a huge free-to-play game that's available on both mobile and PC. It features more than 700 unique characters, as well as billions of ways to customize them. It has tons of different challenges like bosses, dungeons, and even more. And you can choose to go hard on the PvP aspect of the game and fight different players in the arenas. Or you could get into the amazing graphics and intricate lore of Teleria, which is engulfed in the shadow of Dark Lord Sirith. Jump in and learn the game through the tutorial and get into Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is constantly updating their game with new updates happening every month, featuring new champions, levels, and events. I personally really love the design of each of the champions with the amazing in-game graphics and the amazing character designs. If you start playing now, you can play through the Call of Arbiter, an awesome new limited series which goes into the lore of each character and the world. As a bonus, Raid's adding some new characters as champions that you could play with in-game rewards, with the first one being Artak, the Orc Warlord. Artak is free and he looks sick, and all you have to do is log into Raid for a week between now and July 24th, and you definitely want to get this guy in your arsenal, so get Raid now and don't miss out on the cool new content. Sign up using my link in the description or by scanning this QR code in order to get free items, including the Epic Champion Knight Errant, as well as 200,000 silver, 4 energy refills, 1 epic skill tome, and 1 day's worth of XP booster. With a huge player base of millions around the world, it's never been a better time to sign up. Thank you Raid once again for the amazing sponsorship opportunity, and without further ado, let's get back to the regularly scheduled video. So let's start with one of the synergies I see talked about the most, that being Wartox and Wormwood, which is probably one of the most talked about synergies in recent memory, at least for me, with all the people I argue about over whether or not Wartox is bad, and I want to talk about it. The obvious reason you would use these two together is for the easy access to living logs. And this will give Wormwood easy access to his Bramble Husk, which is a very powerful tool. Now with that being said, who cares? Like, I don't understand this one if I'm being honest. While I understand that the Bramble Husk access is really cool and epic, fundamentally the way this combo works is you get living logs, which already isn't really difficult to get if you ask me, using Wormwood's option of minus 20 HP for 1 living log, then you just heal that back with Wartox's AoE healing. But like, just get a tent, and like, you don't have to play Wartox for this? You know, it's not even a matter of living logs for the most part, in my opinion. Like, I've never been in a situation where I've been struggling for living logs, given the fact that if I wanted to, at any point in time, I can just go into a pig farm, hire pigs, chop down a forest, and get a ton of tree guards to spawn in droves. Ultimately, I just don't understand this synergy. I think its merit is pretty surface level, all things considered. I just don't really see the value in both of the characters being paired together for such little payoff. It's definitely not something that would dictate my playstyle. Wolfgang and Wigfrid are a pretty good combat-focused synergy, with the two becoming a powerhouse in their own rights. During combat, they just trample over every enemy and boss, with Wolfgang's double damage speaking for itself, and Wigfrid's ability to provide both sanity, health, and armor to Wolfgang make them a very strong couple. The synergy is strong for certain playstyles, specifically people who might want to rush bosses together, but I've never really felt like killing bosses was the end-all be-all personally. To me, killing bosses isn't as meaningful as setting up methods in which you can frequently kill the bosses, you know, just farming them. But overall, it is pretty strong for what it is, but it's just not for me. Wicker and Maxwell is a strong option for Maxwell. Like, this is what I would call a very one-sided synergy, in which Wicker doesn't really benefit all too much from it, as opposed to Maxwell, who gains access to Wickerbottom's tools. While Wicker gets mostly nothing out of this, It does make Maxwell a stronger character, if not outright, a Wicker replacement once you get the Bone Helm. Though calling this a synergy feels a little bit disingenuous just because of how one-sided it is. Wicker and Willow is mutually beneficial to one another, to a point. Willow basically removes the limiter on Wickerbottom that is dealing with nightmare creatures pre-Bonehelm by using Bernie to distract nightmare creatures. This lets Wicker go wild on assisting Willow in whatever she might need, whether that be gathering food, resources, or niche things like spawning birds and putting mobs to sleep. This synergy, however, is made rather redundant once you gain access to the Bonehelm, since that can be used to ignore nightmare creatures altogether. WX and Winona is a bit of a one-sided synergy where Winona can provide access to generators for WX to power himself on, and due to things like Varg farms being sought after for Winona, it allows easy access to scanning all 3 hounds with relative ease, giving WX easy access to bio data at most any given point in time. Winona, however, doesn't really benefit all too much from this, other than maybe having somebody else to help move statues, because WX plugging in his speed circuits does influence how fast you move statues from one point to another. But I don't think anybody is particularly clamoring for this synergy. I could go on, but I think I've made a pretty alright example of the synergies that people talk about nowadays, which, in my opinion, paint a picture of other character synergies as a whole. Character synergies aren't really a huge deal when it comes to this game, if I'm being honest. A lot of the synergies that I mentioned are nice to have, but they definitely aren't enough to dictate your character choice. There are some characters who benefit from having other characters, but very rarely is that not one-sided, especially in cases like WX, Winona, Wicker, Maxwell, and even to some degree Wolfgang, Wigfrid, since they're all beneficial to one party in particular as opposed to the other, where one character just kind of leeches off of them. Then there's something like Wicker and Willow, which, while useful, can be supplemented with another item, that being the Bonehelm. Now, there are some characters who are supportive, such as Worley or Wormwood, and while the two do work together pretty well, the biggest thing that they do is provide things for the group in categories. Characters like Worley, Wormwood, and Wicker are good for providing food, for example, while Wartox, Wolfgang, and Wigfrid are good for providing combat benefits. The list goes on what characters support at, but I don't think it's great to think about the characters in a way in which they would support each other on a case-by-case basis. Overall, I think character synergies aren't really impactful enough to influence anybody's really major game plan. Like, I'm definitely not loading into a world and thinking, okay, this server absolutely has to have a Maxwell because there's already a Wickerbottom in there. Like, that just isn't something that really goes through my mind. Ultimately, it's all a matter of characters can only really support each other insofar as what the player themselves can do. So if you're a newer player who wasn't all too familiar with the character synergies and roles, then it's definitely not worth stressing about what characters work well with one another, because you should be focusing on what you can do well for the team. If you're a more experienced player, then you probably already have an established character that you really like playing, have gotten really good at, and know the ins and outs of, to a degree where if somebody were to tell you to play a different character, you might not be as big of a benefit as if you just played your main. That's not to say that it's not a bad idea to explore. I definitely think that every character fills a certain role, and every character has their own unique set of perks and skills that contribute to whether or not you do choose to play them at any given point in time. Especially with how easy it is to swap between them, it gives you ample opportunity to explore every character's unique items, perks, abilities, and just explore each character's quirks. But that's basically all I have to say about character synergies. Let me know what you guys think about the topic, and if there's any mutual synergy that I missed out on or is worth mentioning. I really just wanted to talk about this lingering idea that's sort of been talked about here and there, and weigh in on it. Because at the end of the day, I feel like character synergies are either too one-sided to be considered an actual synergy, not impactful enough to warrant you shifting your entire game plan around, or not too impactful at the end of the day compared to what you can do if you were playing a character who you were already really good and really familiar with. That being said, I do like each character's interactions with one another because there are definitely perks and quirks here and there that kind of have overlap that you could play around with other characters, but I would hardly call those synergies. Big thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. Remember to click the link in the description, scan the QR code. I would really appreciate you guys if you give it a try. And that's all I really wanted to talk about. So until next time, Bye.